she walked into a hospital ward and did something no one in her position had ever done before. She reached out and held the hand of a patient that the whole world was afraid to touch. No gloves, no fear, just her. In a single moment, she changed how the world saw illness, compassion, and power. She was adored by millions. But behind the cameras, behind the crowds, her life was far more complicated than anyone knew. Before the world knew her name, she was just a girl from a noble family, growing up in the long shadow of tradition, title, and expectation. She was shy, gentle, not the kind of girl anyone expected to shake the world, but she had a quality that no title could teach, a warmth that made strangers feel seen. Then came the announcement that would rewrite her entire life. She was to marry into the most powerful royal family on earth. The wedding was watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. A fairy tale, they said. But fairy tales, as anyone who's read enough of them knows, are rarely what they seem. Inside the gilded walls she'd entered, something was already breaking, and the girl who had seemed so quiet, so gentle, was about to become the most remarkable woman of her generation. The early years inside that ancient institution were suffocating. There were rules for everything: how to stand, how to speak, how to smile for the cameras. She was barely out of her teenage years when the spotlight swallowed her whole. Cameras followed her everywhere. Photographers chased her down streets, through doorways, across whole cities. She was the most photographed woman alive, and she had nowhere to hide. Inside the marriage, things were harder still. She spoke later about feeling desperately alone in a house full of people. She struggled deeply. She asked for help, and too often no one came. But she did not let that darkness win. She found a different kind of power, not the kind written in royal decrees, but the kind you earn by standing in front of real pain and refusing to look away. She began visiting hospitals, homeless shelters, drug rehabilitation centers, not for the cameras. She went quietly, early in the morning, before anyone could set up a lens. She would sit on the bed of a patient who had no visitors. She would hold their hand and talk, like a friend, not a dignitary. And people noticed. People always noticed her. Word spread about what she was doing, not through press releases, but through whispers, through grateful letters, through tears shed in quiet rooms. She was becoming something rare and dangerous in that world of pomp and protocol. She was becoming real. The institution around her was ancient, rigid, built from centuries of stone and silence, and she was knocking on its walls from the inside. By the time she was in her early 30s, she had become something even the palace couldn't control. A symbol, a voice, a force. She gave a television interview that cracked the world open. She spoke directly to the camera, no script, no handlers behind the lens. She told the truth about her marriage, her loneliness, and her battles. The world watched in stunned silence. Millions felt for the first time that a royal had finally spoken to them, not above them. Then came the cause that would define her legacy more than any title ever could. She walked onto land littered with mines, hidden explosives buried in the soil of a war-torn country. She wore a protective vest and visor. She did not hesitate. While politicians debated and diplomats signed papers in distant rooms, she was walking the ground herself, meeting the people who had lost limbs, lost family, lost everything. She held children who had been torn apart by a conflict they never chose. And the cameras, this time, followed her into a truth the world needed to see. Her campaign to ban landmines sent shockwaves through governments. Within months of her work in the field, nations began signing treaties. She did not win a war. She ended one quietly, one handshake at a time. But the palace was not watching with pride. Every time she stepped outside its rules, the institution tightened its grip. There were briefings given to newspapers, leaks designed to undermine her, whisper campaigns, closed doors, cold shoulders. She fought back the only way she knew how, by showing up, day after day, for the people the system had forgotten. She was not going to disappear. Away from the institution, she found something she had almost forgotten existed: joy. She danced. She laughed out loud in public. She wore what she wanted. She raised 2 young sons and made sure they understood the world beyond palace gates. She took them to homeless shelters and soup kitchens and theme parks. She wanted them to know that privilege was not a reason to be distant, it was a reason to give back. Those who knew her best said she was at her most alive in those moments, not at banquets or galas, but in a children's ward, sitting on the floor, making a sick child laugh. She continued her charity work at a pace that startled even the organizations she supported. She raised awareness for causes that polite society had long decided were too uncomfortable to discuss. HIV and AIDS, homelessness, mental illness. She brought a human face to pain that newspapers had kept hidden in small print at the back of the page. In doing so, she didn't just change laws, she changed minds. Her private life, meanwhile, was splashed across every front page on Earth. Every relationship scrutinized, every outing analyzed, every expression dissected. She spoke about the pressure of it, the sense of being hunted by lenses that never blinked, yet she never stopped. That was perhaps her greatest act of courage. She once said, paraphrased, that she wanted to be a queen of people's hearts, not of any nation. That was not a slogan. That was a mission statement. She lived it in every hospital room, every minefield, every tearful embrace. And the world was watching, not the world of palaces and protocols, but the real world, the wide, ordinary human world that had claimed her as its own. She was theirs, and they were hers. And then, without warning, everything stopped. It happened on a summer night, in a tunnel beneath one of the most famous cities in the world. She was being chased, as she so often was, by photographers on motorcycles. The chase ended in a crash, and before the sun rose over that city, she was gone. The news hit the world like a wall. People who had never met her wept in the streets. Flowers were left outside the gates of the palace, mountains of them, stretching as far as the eye could see. The crowds stretched for miles. Her funeral was watched by over 2 billion people around the world. 2 billion. Nearly a third of all human beings alive. She had spent her life reaching for ordinary people, and in the end, all of them reached back. Her work did not die with her. The landmine ban she championed became international law. The charities she gave her name to kept growing, fueled by her memory. Her sons carried her mission forward, and her face, that warm, unmistakable face, never really left the world. Some people burn bright for a moment. She burned bright forever. She was born into a world that told her exactly who to be, and she chose to be something far greater. Not a figurehead, not a symbol in a frame on a wall, but a real, living, breathing force of warmth and change. She showed the world that compassion is not weakness, that a hand held out to the suffering is braver than any sword, that you do not need to be perfect to be remarkable. Decades have passed since the world lost her, and still, her name, unsaid here, is the first one that comes to mind when people speak of grace, of courage, of love without conditions. She was, and remains, the people's own. So, who do you think this legend is? Drop your guess in the comments below.